All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Staten. I'm the director of the Brownfields Assistance Center at WVU, and we're excited to partner with the center at Marshall and with DEP on this Brownfields Assessment Grant that is primarily really DEP's, but we are excited to share information about it and help you understand how you can also partner and access some of this technical assistance and support. And so Erin is going to tell you all about their grant, but first I wanted to give us a little bit of context and background about the Brownfields program and sort of how, not the whole history of how Erin got a $2 million Brownfields assessment grant, but just sort of what is the Brownfields program at EPA, what is this money, and what can you do with it? So, all right. The U.S. EPA Brownfield program is a state or a federal program within the U.S. government that provides grants and technical assistance to communities, states, tribes, and others to assess, safely clean up, and sustainably reuse contaminated properties. So there are a number of resources from U.S. EPA, including grants like the ones we're going to talk about today, grants you can apply for directly, funding that flows through the state departments of environmental protection, and then also technical assistance, including the technical assistance to Brownfield program, for which WVU is your provider. So there's a lot of resources out there to help you figure out all things brownfields. One of the ways that EPA does support brownfield redevelopment across the country is through a number of grants. Today, we're going to focus on the assessment grants. And these grants provide funding for inventories, prioritizing and assessing sites, a number of planning activities that we'll talk about, some community involvement, planning across an area as opposed to just a site, and then also to just advance any local planning that may be centered around a brownfield site. And that's the kind of grant that the state DEP has, and that's what we'll be talking about a little bit more for how they're going to implement that and how you can bring it to your community. But first, taking another step back, I wanted to just make sure we all were grounded in what is an environmental assessment. I think that those of us who are doing this all day, every day, maybe forget that that is jargon and not everybody knows. So an environmental assessment is a report that identifies potential or existing environmental contamination liabilities at a property, and it is completed by a qualified environmental professional in West Virginia, also known as a licensed remediation specialist, or LRS. And there are really two main kinds of environmental assessments. A phase one examines the current and historical uses of the site. It uses existing information to identify potential threats to the health and the environment. It does not typically involve sampling. It involves looking back at historical records, frequently lots of interviews of folks who live in the area, current owners, past owners, etc. And then often a phase one will identify some potential contamination or even known contamination through that process and recommend that a phase two environmental site assessment is completed. And that is where you start to include identifying those contaminants more specifically, your chemicals of concern, doing sampling of soil and groundwater, et cetera. And then as you're doing that sampling, perhaps even more targeted sampling to figure out kind of where are the concentrations of that contamination on a site. Why might you need an assessment? So the biggest reason that you'll hear all of us talk about all the time to do an assessment is to always have a phase one environmental assessment conducted before you take ownership of a property. This will allow you to have some liability protections. It's through a process called all appropriate inquiry, and is also something that both the centers and DEP can help you navigate and understand. It also, if you are a nonprofit or public entity, making sure that you do that phase one and you conduct your all appropriate inquiry in the right timeline can open up some potential funding eligibility through places like the US EPA directly. So you want to make sure that you're doing that to make sure you can access those funds. It also helps to give you a better understanding of the state of a property and what the cost might be for remediation or redevelopment, so that you know what you're getting into either before taking on a property at all or before entering into a redevelopment process. In addition to assessment activities on an EPA-funded assessment grant, there are a number of planning activities that you can do. This is just a sampling of the planning activities that EPA specifically identifies, and that link will take you to additional information to sort of their definition of each of these. But there are other things that working with DEP and the EPA we might identify that could fall under one of these or something close enough that could be eligible for your site. So starting last year, EPA started giving out larger grants specifically for assessment to state entities. This is the $2 million that DEP was one of the first winners of. And this allows state entities that have high capacity to apply for that funding and then assist communities or organizations that maybe don't have the capacity or the need for a full grant of their own. Through that process, we hope that it's going to build additional brownfield capacity in more local communities. And if, for example, you only have one brownfield site or target site in your community, it's a lot faster to partner with somebody like DEP who already has that money to get your site assessed, rather than try to apply yourself on a federal grant cycle that can take at least 18 months to get your funding. And I won't commit, Aaron, to any specific timeline, but I can commit that it will be faster than 18 months in my experience. And with that, I'll let Aaron tell us a little bit more about their program in particular.
Thanks, Carrie. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you so much for taking some time to be here today. We just want to discuss, there's just a few more slides, but and we really want to just open it up to talk about any sites that you may already know that could be assessed. But we're here, of course, to talk about free assessment, free assistance to West Virginia communities through this grant. And we can assess brownfield properties, as well as do the reuse planning that Carrie had talked about for cleanup and reuse for a more beneficial use. So just a quick overview of the Office of Environmental Remediation. So within the West Virginia DEP, one of our divisions is the Division of Land Restoration, and then the Office of Environmental Remediation is within that branch of the Division of Land Restoration. In particular, the Brownfields group is a really small group. We have 5 project managers, and I'm the program manager. And we focus on cleanup of contaminated sites and all throughout West Virginia, so that these properties can be used to their highest potential and provide the greatest return to the community through a tax base, through jobs, things like that nature. So our logo here is designed to show what we strive for, and that is to begin with dilapidated and contaminated sites, and then finish with a community resource that everyone can be proud of. The Office of Environmental Remediation does not perform inspections or enforcement in any way, like some of the other offices within the West Virginia DEP, but instead our focus is assessment, cleanup, and redevelopment, and to really help communities as much as we possibly can. Next. So the purpose of the grant is to help redevelop brownfield properties throughout West Virginia through environmental assessment and reuse planning. Brownfields are properties that are unused or underused because they are either contaminated or thought to be contaminated. All work will be paid for by the US EPA Brownfields Grant through this new $2 million grant that we received. We received the funding and began October 1st this year, so just a few weeks ago. There are several types of environmental assessments that can be performed, like Carrie had mentioned before, using these grant funds. So this includes phase 1 and 2 environmental site assessments, asbestos inspections, lead-based paint surveys, radon inspections, mold inspections, and site reuse planning. Next. And so our new $2 million grant focuses on 3 regions throughout West Virginia. These areas are the Ohio River Valley region, the Potomac Highlands region, and the Southern Coalfields region. And the specific counties are listed there. We'd like to target these areas and the counties listed here first, but if there is a brownfield site with great redevelopment potential outside of these target areas, we will likely fund the project since we can perform assessments statewide with this grant. Next. So we've invited you here today because we cannot possibly do this alone. We cannot spend $2 million alone. We absolutely have to have partners within each community so that you all can identify the properties and then let us know how we can help, how we can spend this $2 million. So during the grant writing process, we did make contact with several local groups who expressed interest in participating and helping us out. And these groups, of course, include the West Virginia Brownfields Assistance Centers, the West Virginia Community Development Hub, West Virginia Rivers, and Planning and Development Councils, and of course, you. And thank you so much again for being here today. So to help us spend the money as wisely as we can, we hope to have input from all of these groups and you, as well as any others within the communities that would like to contact us and understand the needs of your communities. We refer to our group of stakeholders as the Brownfields Community Advisory Team, or BCAT for short. And by funding environmental assessments and site reuse planning for these brownfields properties, we hope to free up other resources within your counties, within the state and municipalities that can then be used in the redevelopment process. Next. Okay, so here's a quick overview of the process. We're currently at step 1, where we're informing communities about the grant and identifying people and organizations that can help. And we're trying to spread the word as much as we can. We've kind of started doing these public meetings within each region, but we also wanted to, open this up statewide, and that's why we wanted to do a virtual meeting as well. So step 2 is to build the inventory of sites that are considered brownfields, either unused or underused due to contamination or perceived contamination. And a few folks have already reached out, including the Brownfields Assistance Centers, with potential sites. So we've actually already started to build an inventory, which we're really excited about. And then step 3 will be to prioritize our brownfield sites based on need and redevelopment potential. And then, of course, in step 4, we'll work our way through the site inventory. We'll do the environmental assessments. We'll do the asbestos and lead-based paint inspections, potential soil and groundwater testing, and a phase 2, and reuse planning until our funding runs out. And so throughout this process, it's a 5-year grant through 2027. We'll hold follow-up meetings and send out updates as much as possible to keep you all informed as much as possible. Next. So you may be asking yourself, what can I do and how can I help? So first and foremost, please spread the word. Thank you again for being here today. Please pass along this information. You can, once you get these slides and the recording, feel free to pass it out, send it to as many people as you can within your communities and the folks that you work with. And if you can identify any other community leaders, send them our way or let us know and we can contact them. We'd be happy to have conversations with as many community leaders and partners that we can. If you think of any other community partners that should be on our list, please reach out to them and us. Feel free to add a link to our grant website to your webpage. We do have an announcement on our website. If you just go to DEP Office of Environmental Remediation, it pops right up. And of course, if you have some brownfield sites in mind that you need assessment or could use some reuse planning for, please reach out to us. Next. Okay, so if you do have some sites, you may be wondering, is this considered a brownfield? So in all likelihood, yes, the answer is yes. So if you have some sites that are in your community that are old industrial buildings, manufacturing factories, even just vacant lots, schools, service stations, all of those are considered brownfield sites. And basically, if a human has touched a piece of property, then the site is likely a brownfield. So like I said, some sites have already been identified for assessment, but we definitely need your help to identify more sites and to prioritize these sites along the way. $2 million will assess many sites throughout West Virginia. So please spread the word and let us know about them. We're really excited for this grant. It's the largest assessment funding EPA has provided. And so, like I said, we're just really excited to get started and assess as many sites throughout the state as we can. Next. So there's our contact information. Again, I'm the Brownfields Program Manager. Derek Hancock is also here. He's our Brownfields Coordinator. You can contact either of us anytime. If you have a site or if you just want more information about what we can do in your community, please feel free to reach out. And if you have any questions, I haven't been monitoring the chat, but if you have any questions, there's plenty of time if you'd like to unmute and or put it in the chat, and we can answer your questions here today.
Thanks, Erin. While everyone's thinking of their wonderful questions, I just want to make a quick plug. And when Becca sends out the follow-up to this, she'll include this, but we have a webinar scheduled next week on November 1st, talking specifically about those planning activities that are eligible activities on a grant. It's primarily targeted to people who are applying for grants, but it's the same information. It would still apply to this. So if you think, you know, maybe you have something like that you'd be interested in figuring out if it's eligible or not, that would be a great thing to join. George, you want to jump in and talk about the PAQ? Or
I was actually hoping Erin would talk
we'll
about
let
it.
Erin jump in and do it. Okay.
I mean, I'll just mention it, and Erin, you can add it, but every site will require a property approval questionnaire. And it does require like all your basic information, where it's located, and who owns it, and any detail you can provide, any tax parcel information, and then historical information, what's it currently used for, but and more important, what's it been used for in the past. And any information about it at all is useful. So if it's a vacant lot and you're just not sure, well let that be known, and try to find out all you can about it. And then the other big part of the property approval questionnaire is the reuse potential for that site. Why is it of such interest to you to have it looked at? It's not just to look at the site for no reason, but it's because it's got some sort of significant reuse potential associated with it. So those are the main components of it. But Erin, I guess you can interact with anything else you want to add to that.
Absolutely. Thanks, George. That's a really good item to add to this. So the two kind of pieces that we would need to get started for assessment, the first is the property approval questionnaire, or PAQ for short. And all of those go to our EPA project officer, Joe Novak, for approval before we can get started. Joe usually gets back to us within 24 hours. It's usually always, yes, go for it. And we can get started at that point. The second item that we have to have is a right of entry access agreement signed by both DEP and the property owner, so that our contractor can be on site, or else we cannot set foot on site when we can't get our assessments performed. So those are the two pieces that we will need to get started on any site assessment: the PAQ and the right of entry access agreement.
Yeah, and you can request an assessment and not be the property owner. So if you're a city and you don't yet own it and you're thinking about owning it, or you're partnering with someone, you do not have to be the owner, but the owner does have to be cooperating, because they do have to allow folks to get on the site. Even for the phase 1 assessment, which doesn't involve sampling, they still need to go to the site and walk the site and get a better sense of it. So any other questions? I see we have lots of great partners from the hub. Thanks y'all for coming, and it's good that y'all are here and will be able to help us disseminate the information guerrilla style. So thanks for coming.
Yes, the hub and West Virginia Rivers. I saw a couple folks as well. Thank you so much for being here today.
I would just warn you all that Ray Moeller is going to spend this money if nobody else does. So if you want to, if a competition element helps us get it out there, Ray is ready to help get this money out, as we all are, but he is especially.
Yeah, I think I've got about 10% of it spoken for, don't I, Erin? Maybe not that much, but you know.
We appreciate you, Ray. All the sites you've forwarded to us already. It's a huge help.
I don't see any other questions in the chat.
I would also just add one other comment that, some folks may not really know what they need in terms of environmental assessment. Well, call us and we'll help you figure that out. Sometimes it maybe just needs to start with that phase one. Or if you know about a building that's going to get rehabbed and that's what's going to happen, then we can talk about asbestos and lead paint and all those things. Or so we can help you with that. Don't worry about we're not sure what to ask for. We can help you figure all that out. And Aaron, just a little side note, you had mentioned radon inspections as well. We've done that a few times. It's usually not an issue, but in some of our southeastern counties, some of those, a few of those areas can be a higher risk for just naturally occurring radon on some sites. So it's nice to keep some of those little things we sometimes forget about in mind as we're doing these.
Absolutely. Good point, George.
We do have another question in the chat from Heather. She said, is there a map of current brownfields identified by DEP?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, the answer is no, but that's actually something that's been on our to-do list for quite some time. We really want to get to that. Hopefully with this grant, we could in the next year, maybe try to do that. Like I said, with every grant, we build in brownfields inventory. So we do have sites listed with addresses and things of that nature, but we'd really like to map out our sites. So hopefully we'll get time to do that within the next year.
Hey, y'all, I have a quick question. Well, maybe it's not quick, but many of the communities that I work with struggle with capacity, and that's just like a huge problem across the board. And so I'm wondering what kind of strategies or guidance you have for how to talk about this with folks in a way that recognizes that, and in a way that kind of honors that, like, oh, I know your community members are stretched thin and already working on 5, 6, 10 other projects. So like, what kind of guidance and suggestions do you have for how to talk about brownfields and these opportunities in a way that like isn't overwhelming and gives them sort of bite-sized pieces, if you will?
That's a great question. Carrie, do you want to lead? Do you want me to go for it?
I'm formulating if you have something already formulated. I have thoughts. I'm just putting them in order.
Absolutely. So I guess just from DEP's perspective and our grant perspective, we completely run with it. All we need is the PAQ completed, and we can help you with that even. And then the right of entry, we can help complete. We just need the property owner's signature. So that's one tactic to use, is to say, hey, we just need the site and a little bit of information to start, and then DEP runs with it and we'll provide the final report. And then if you need explanation from that point, we can explain what the phase 1 or 2 says. That's what we're here for. And we provide that assistance all the time. So if you want to do it from that perspective, that we're the experts, we run with it. There's really, nothing that the person has to be super involved with. And I agree with you. The term brownfield, is kind of intimidating, and people don't always understand what that even means. So the conversation, definitely is not always an easy one to do. And then for capacity building from there, it even gets harder. So, but I think the Brownfields Assistance Centers are something, we definitely cherish that these Brownfields Assistance Centers are in our state, and they work so hard and provide so many opportunities. So they're really the outreach as well. And they're in communities, and they can have those conversations with folks as well.
Yeah, I think that is very close at the end bit, especially of what I was going to say. I think that always you can pull in us and DEP to talk about the more technical pieces with communities. But I think where we've seen a lot of success at the centers is that people don't call us and say, we have a brownfield, right? They call and say, we really want to do a community center. We really need a new development and we have this site and it used to be a landfill or it used to be a factory and we don't know what to do. And so I think talking about it and framing it in those ways and letting us be the experts on the environmental bit is what is successful in those communities. And I think it's something that's not necessarily unique to West Virginia brownfield redevelopment, but is definitely not universal across the country, which is that, you know, larger places have brownfield programs, even at city levels, and they're like going after this in a concerted, organized way. Whereas in West Virginia, a city learns about how to do a brownfield redevelopment because they have one brownfield that they're going to redo, right? And so they don't need to learn the history of every single thing about brownfields from the history of all time. It's good if they learn some context, but they don't need to be experts. They just want to build a soccer field, and that's okay. As an example. So yeah, I think that the partnerships, and that's where the strength of West Virginia is these strong partnerships for sure.
Yeah, I'll just pile on that, getting them in touch with us and especially, I guess, kudos to everybody who's on this call and then anybody who's participated in the Brownfields conference or any of those who educated themselves, because then you can know, like going in, as you become aware of the projects that Carrie's speaking of, that we may not have a clue on because you're out there doing it with them. But especially if there's a property transaction that is imminent in any fashion that is mentioned by anybody to do with the city or a nonprofit or anybody, getting that phase one analysis ahead of that. And you just kind of realizing that, yeah, that's a thing that needs to happen. Hey, I better call Carrie or Ray or, you know, get in contact with the office or George, you know, so keep yourself as well educated as you can and don't hesitate to reach out and ask questions to have additional clarity.
And I'll add to that on my end. We go all over the state all the time. It is not a problem for us to stop by wherever to talk to whoever, whenever. We do evening meetings, morning meetings, noon meetings, whatever is needed. And last time I checked, our rates are still $0 an hour. So I always just say use us, but don't abuse us. But we're happy to help you to figure those things out. Like Carrie said, you don't have to know about all the environmental pieces of it. It's you just got a particular project in mind or whatever, and you've got a particular property in mind. That's enough to get us started, and we can help you with the rest of that. So we're truly here to help on making Aaron's money go away, but use it for good things.
Absolutely, yes. If we blow through this 2 million, we'll ask for more. We'll write an application and try to get another 2 million. That would be a great problem to have, truly.
Yeah, and DEP has historically had assessment grants like this. This is just the first time that EPA has given out this much at once. And so it's really exciting to have such a huge bank. And DEP is consistently awarded that money. I can tell you, because Aaron won't brag, but I have been told by many people that this is one of the best grants they've ever read. So they are clearly know what they're doing, and they're going to continue. I'm confident they'll continue to have these resources. So while this is a 5-year grant, we can spend it faster and we can keep asking for more.
And my comment to that is I totally agree. I have said this multiple times to a lot of people that the EPA Brownfield dollars that end up in DEP's hands is some of the best money spent in the state, because we've been able to utilize it for that one little project in that one community that otherwise wouldn't have had an opportunity to go after any kind of other funding. So it is one of the best resources we have available in our state. And Aaron and Derek are halfway decent to work with too, actually.
Thanks,
no,
George.
actually, they're great. They're super.
All right, I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks to Aaron for putting this all together and for really engaging the community and all of our partners. As I said, Becca will be following up with all of our resources from today, including the slides and the recording, and she'll share additional information about that other webinar, which she did put in the chat. So if you want to grab that, you can grab it before you log out. And we look forward to working with all of you on all of the projects.